Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to explore the animation capabilities inside vMix's GT Title Designer. But before we get into that, as always, I want to start off by inviting everybody, if you have any questions, any comments, anything you'd want us to sort of focus on during the show, just post them in the comments and we'll try to get to it live here. Also, if you'd like to join us live on the show, we have a link in the show notes and here on the screen. So just connect to that and somebody will get you here live with us on the set. Okay, so let me jump in here and just level set. One of the things that we wanted to do in this show was really explore technically in depth some of the animation features inside GT Title Designer. And to do that, we put together a simple vMix preset that is basically an award show that will let us highlight each of these capabilities that we want to talk about here. So I'm going to start by actually jumping over to that right now. So if I put this here and we bring this up, let me sort of jump in here and show you the output from vMix. Give me a second here. And so this is the basic award show that we have here. And the way this will work is we have segments that come up. Each segment covers a specific class of gear. It's sort of best in show. When we jump in, we actually will go and display this. These are all titles we're walking through now. So in here we have sort of an animated graphic. We're doing a little bit of that with scripting, and I will explain how the scripting works with the animation tools inside of Title Designer. And then we go in and we have a set of features that we can display related to the item that we have for this award. And we end up by showing the price. And there's a couple of things you'll notice in this. First, these features that we put up on the side all came up, sequentially, so we were able to control how we displayed each of them. You'll also notice that in the title, right above where it says PTZ Optics Studio Pro, we have something called Camera Gear, which is the class. You'll notice that that text is animating. It's sort of, it gets red at the top and then sort of clears out and runs through a blue cycle. So those are all elements, everything from how we display the graphics to the layout of the features. Those are all elements that we have that are animation features inside GT Title Designer. So to start, probably a good place to go is into GT Title Designer directly. And I'll put a background layout so this isn't as distracting. This is sort of how everything lays out. What I really want to focus on is everything up here. This is all the animation capabilities on the animation tab. Before I jump into that, let me just go and check on the comments we have here. So let's see. So we have a few things coming in. So we have greetings from Thessaloniki. So, Vangelis, I hear that it is pretty hot over there in Greece. So hopefully you are doing well. So thank you for joining us here. Let's see, we have Deadline AV says, hey, I'm liking the pre-show screen. Thank you, Deadline. The music is actually written by my nephew for that. Martin Mahoney Music, so you can thank him for that as well as part of all of this. So thanks for joining. So we have, let's see, another one. So hello all from Griswold Sports. Let's see, and Griswold, thank you for joining us. Marco Fabri, thank you for joining us. Good to have you here. Let's see, Obsessive Audio is a hi y'all, so hi y'all back. Thank you for joining us, Obsessive. And let's see, and we have, and just Deadline AV just said it's Henry from Yonkers, so New York. So great topic today. So Henry, thank you for joining us from Yonkers. Joe, one of our team here, is also from up that way. So Good to have you here. And we have you demand from Brockville, Canada. So thank you for joining us. Okay, so let's dive in here because there's a lot of capabilities in the animation side that we really should cover here. So let's see. The basic premise for how all of the animations work inside of GT Title Designer is that there is some trigger event that causes the animation to start or to run. And that is basically what we have up here. This is coming around and saying, how do we want to set things up? So we can say when a transition in happens, how do we want to handle that? Or a transition out. So like when it loads or when it's unloading from program out, what do you want to have set up? You have a set of pages. So in these pages, there's 10 of them, you can set things up to say, I want to be able to switch from one page to another when I have a title up, and those pages can each be configured with their own unique attributes. So I can show and hide different items, have different active elements like, things that will, rotate or show or start. All of those things can be done through setting up different pages, and you trigger it by saying, which page do I want? And selecting one of those pages is going to trigger all the things to hide, show, and move that you want to have happen. We also have continuous, and continuous is basically what we were using for that title on the top. Over here where it says audio gear, and that was sort of changing colors, we just had that set up for continuous. And so that's how that would work. And then we have the data change. And though we didn't do a lot specifically with data change here, I just want to spend a moment sort of talking about this. So data change in and data change out. The way these work, it's kind of interesting. When a new element of data comes in, what data change in does is it recognizes that from data sources, there's a new data element that needs to be replaced. When it gets that, it uses data change in to say, what do I want to do to get the old element out? So it's sort of like logically a little different than the way you would think, but there's logic to it because when new data comes in, these are the two steps I want. I want to move the old element out, and I want to automate and animate the new element coming in. So that is data change out and data change in. So data change in takes and says, what do I want to do with the element that's already being displayed because it's new data? And data change out is now that I'm finished and I want to put the element out on screen, how do I want to animate that? So possibly a little confusing because it's backwards, but that's how that works. So when we look at all of these, how do they work? So transition in, transition out, clearly when something comes in, that's what gets triggered. But this isn't just on the entire title. I can actually take any element inside the title, and I could look at this and say, okay, let me sort of turn this off to make it a little easier for us to see stuff. So if I'm in here, I have right now a layer that I have set up, and we can talk about that in a minute. And then I have each one of these different elements. So I have feature 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I'm showing here. I can take any one of these individually and say, when this title transitions in, what do I want this element to do? And so that's important because I can do it on a single element. I can do it on a layer. So I can come in and say, I want everything in this layer to slide in from the side when I transition in. So layers, in addition to sort of having sort of scope where it creates a cropping boundary. So any animation or movement inside that layer ends at the edges of where that layer is defined. So anything going on in here ends right at these edges that you see highlighted in green here. But so I can have the entire layer come on and off and treat everything as a single block, or I can have individual elements do different things. The different things you can have something do when it comes in are actually the animations that you have up here. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are different types of visual elements. So things like bouncing in, image sequence, which is one thing we will cover at a future show, but we're not covering this show because there's more to this where you got to actually work with video, convert it to stills, and do other things. So we'll be covering that in another show, but that's just another animation capability you have. You have things reveals, which sort of just, make something visible sort of from a different direction, slide in, slide up, down. Zoom fades and expands. All of these are just different dynamic motions that you'll see. And one of the things that you can see with this, so let me sort of do this reveal. This reveal, since it's an animation that takes place over a period of time, you can come and say, after the transition happens, after that trigger event happens, how long do you want to wait to actually initiate this animation? So that's what the delay is. And then you have a duration, which says how long should this animation last? So if it's something that's sliding in or sliding up from the base, something like that, you end up being able to say how long should that process take. And you also have something with style called in a motion, it can either just start, stay at the same speed, and stop, which gives you sort of a very sudden hard stop. But you also have things that are called easing. You sort of ease in and ease out. So what it does is it slowly starts, moves at its normal speed, then slows down to a stop on the other end. That can sometimes be visually more pleasing, but it really depends on how you'd want to see that. And then they have bounce in and bounce out, which I guess is popular for certain things. I didn't find it particularly useful, but it is one of the styles that you can have where things sort of have more of a jerky motion to it. The other thing you can do, though, for a lot of these motion-based animations is you can say, what direction do you want it to start from? So you can say, I want it to come in off from the left, or I want it to go in from the right or bottom corners. So, you pick your direction and you can do that. So combining direction with speed can make this look, very elegant. You can sort of sit there and make sure that whatever you're doing now, the timing, the meter of it makes sense visually. And that's something in all of these things. It's not just the technology behind all of this. It's also sort of the aesthetic choices you make. What works? How does it pacing wise feel when I'm bringing these elements on or taking them off? So something to consider, and that's something you can play with. There's basically sort of, it starts out with a half second and then a second, but you can type in other things here. So I could type in, 2.75 if I wanted something to go for 2 3/4 seconds, and that should work there. So logically, the way this is working is that you pick an element down here, you pick the trigger event that you want to associate with that element. You pick the animation style that you want to apply when that trigger event happens, and then you play with the variables associated with that, timing, direction, and the sort of start-stop state that you want to have in place. And as you do this, you have the ability to look at things as they come on and off. So if I look at this element here, I can come and say, I want to actually play how this will appear on screen. And, it will give me that. You can also do a play in and out. I don't think this has really an out other than just, sort of disappearing. But so this now lets you, as you do this, as you create these animations, you now have the ability to sort of rough preview all of them. And that can be very, very useful for how you can manage this. There are a couple of other things, though, in here that can be useful from a technical side. So the first one is this little storybook up here, which lists all of the animations that you have set up. So it's saying, what's the object that this is happening to? What's the trigger that I'm using for it? And what's the animation associated with that trigger? And then all of the timing elements that we have with that. So this is exactly sort of that flow that I told you about. You can go in here and you can see everything that you have set. So if something doesn't look right, when you are going through and sort of using that animation in a production, you can go in here and say, okay, what specifically is happening with each event? Unfortunately, and this is something I would love to see, there's no way for me to go in and say, can you actually sort of open this, or can I edit this here? This is really just a view only. So at least as far as I can tell, there's nothing I was able to do to sort of click on that and track it. But that is something that can definitely be useful with debugging, because otherwise it can be very difficult to figure out if you accidentally added an animation to something you shouldn't have, how to find it. Not simple. That makes it much, much easier. The other piece is that if you set up an animation for one element, you can actually take and assign it to another element. So I can go copy to and take this and say, okay, now I want to copy from page 1 to page 2, things like that. Or I want to take what I did for the transition in and set it up for transition out. And then you can go and just change a few things that you want. So in each of these things, like especially when you're working with pages, you can turn around and say, I really want to take and now copy from one page to the next and then change what I want individually on each page, but it gets me to a good start point. So another useful tool inside of the animation controls to make things work. So that's everything in terms of the tech pieces of internal animations in GT title design, but I want to show how this all comes together in an actual preset. But before I get there, let me just see if we have anything else. So yeah, we have Obsessive Audio saying, oh, I'm sorry, one off. So we have Gunnar from Sweden. Gunnar, automation, thank you for joining us. Definitely appreciate it. And we have Obsessive Audio saying, hey, from Toronto. So welcome, Obsessive. Okay, so the next step then in looking at this is really to come back and say, let's look at the vMix preset that we put together to leverage all of this. So in here now, we have a few things that I want to sort of just walk through. So I have basically a single color black screen, which is what we start on. This black screen, if you look, when it comes into program, what it does is it loads what I want in the preview screen, which is basically this next intro slide. So welcome to the Best in Show Awards. So we get that. And a point to note as we do these types of things, I added this 1 second delay because if you do this with no delay, you can end up where it doesn't really get to do the transition in fully, and so things don't end up looking the way you want. Putting the 1 second delay says, I know that whatever was in preview before is now in program, and I can put something new in preview. Without that, you can end up saying, the thing that I'm putting in preview gets into preview and transitions into program. And so it sort of the timing can be off. So you have to look in your fade or whatever the transition in you have set up, what's the time for that? Then add a little additional time. And that gives you the sense of, I know that everything is set before I change the preview. And that's, preview is one of those ones you have to be careful with because it is being used in the fade in the same way that you're trying to use it in the on transition in. So just a quick point there. So when we do this, so I'll just take this as my next segment. So now I load this in, and we have Welcome to the Best in Show Awards in program. And this, similarly, it has a transition in, which starts us at the very start of our awards data. So we'll get into the data right after this. So it says, go back and just jump to the first element inside of our data store, our data source for our award. So this is our camera category. And then we set up the category, which is the next input as we go along into preview. And so again, we just delay to make sure all this stuff is cleanly transmit it over to program before we touch preview. Something else we did here. So now you start to see the process. These are just titles that we have set up. So we come here, it transitions. When we transition this into program, he pulls this into preview. When we push him into program, it pulls the category that we're looking for into preview. And then when I actually go and put this category up, so I'll just sort of go to the next segment here, what it is doing now is it is loading this product loop. And so what this title does is it has all of the information that we need for the, puts up the award label. Sorry, nope, I'm jumping ahead of myself. This one actually just handles the image. If you remember when we came up, we had those camera images just rotating. So I'll transition over to this. And what this will do is numerous things. So let me just go here and say, so in the camera gear, when this comes in, it just does the one load to preview of the next one. In here, though, it's doing a lot. So on the transition in, we're putting an overlay on. And the overlay is basically, I'll sort of just look over here. This is the next title that we have set up. This is the one that we were just analyzing over on the side. This is all the different data elements associated with the winner of that award category. So we activate that preview, and then what we do is we start a script, and I'll show you that in a moment, which basically just loops through those images of the product that you saw. And we do that on transition in. On transition out, we sort of unwind this. We take the overlay off. We go back and we sort of say, I just want to go to the next row in my data source because I finished that category when I transition out. We finish that category, and I tell the rotating image script to stop running. So we're basically prepping to go in and then prepping to go out. So let's just take a look at when I do the transition to bring them in. So that merges in, it puts this up here, and then it starts showing this image over here of the camera. And the first one stays on for a while because it's sort of showing the device that is there. And then it's just going to go and continue through this sequence. So the way we're doing this is leveraging a little bit of scripting and the pages capability for this GT title. So I'll just show you the script because it's worth taking a look at it, even though it's pretty simple. So for this product loop, which is running right now, we're doing basically a while true. So this is the thing that we had sort of talked about with scripting. Some of these things you can do very simply. So this is basically saying, I want you to do all of these things in the middle between this while true and end while. And so that basically says, take these steps and just keep repeating them. And the way we stop this is we actually stop the script from running. So there's no exit point. There's no trigger to exit internal to the script. We just manually, outside the script, go and say, stop running. So what we're doing is we are using an API function called select index. Now this has multiple uses, but in the context of a GT title, what it's going to say is, I want you to basically take and switch between different pages. So select index is the index of the page. And all these pages have essentially is a set of images on them. And each page says, show image 1, hide image 2 and 3. Then show image 2, hide image 1 and 3. That's all we're doing as we move through these pages. So we sort of start with the center image, so usually the beauty shot, and then we move back, and then we start to do a rotation around. And we do that as a loop. And we have timing between these. So that's all we did here. We take and say, which page in the GT title do I want to use, which just has those images hidden or showing, and I put timers between them to create that staggered look as the image loops. And that's basically all that's going on over here. This is just this loop with changing pages. So now what we have though is we have this other title over it, but this other title is just showing this part right up here where you're seeing who won the award, but it's not showing any of the features. So on this title, so there's one title over another. On the back title, we're using pages to rotate the images. On this though, we're using pages to highlight and hide features. So if I go and say, I want to show features now, as I pull this over, all I'm doing is I'm selecting page 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that has each feature. And all I do on the first page is I show feature 1 and hide features 2, 3, 4, and the price, which is sort of feature 5. And then as I go through pages, I'm able to sort of bump through and just show the next feature, show the next feature. And that's exactly what you see. So this comes on sort of a simple, I'm popping these in a list. This can be used for something like this. This could be used to show segments in a show. So say you want to have a show broken into different segments, you can actually use these pages to say, now when I'm on sort of segment 2 or topic 2 or whatever I want, I could have a sidebar sort of come out and show the next topic. And you see all the other topics. And again, a lot of flexibility with this, because not only can I show or hide, but I could do things like change the color of this text. So I could dim it or something to make it a light gray and the other's white. So you always see the bright color of the one that's active and dimmer versions of the ones that you've already covered. So different things to do. But again, this is how this animation starts to work when you think about it as a sequence of steps that you can take when you do things with the elements inside of your title. So when we get through all this, I basically can show all the features. We show the price, and then when I'm done, I can go back and say, okay, let me just go to the next segment. And all it's done is it sort of moved back to show the best in show category. And then it's moved the data store up to the next row. So now this is all the stuff on audio gear. And if I sort of jump in here, we're doing the same thing, but now with a different set of images, different set of data, but it is all the same basic elements that we have here. And we're just sort of running this now as a, basic sequence of awards that we can give out. So that hopefully gives you a sense of how you can start to use these animations. So so how did we do this specifically? We used transition in when we set all this up to hide all the different things that we wanted to have hidden. So that basically, it hid all of the features, the bullet points, and the price. So we hid all of those right away. We used the continuous trigger for doing this audio gear. So that the thing that is very gently sort of scrolling colors up. So let me actually I'm going to jump back over to GT Title Designer here. And let me show you exactly how we did this. So inside, let me sort of put a background on it again that makes it a little easier to see. So if I go here and select the category audio gear, if I go back to say, how do I actually set this up? So when I set this up, I'm setting this up with a gradient. And the gradient has, if you color something with a gradient, you have sort of a start color and then middle stops and an end color, which is sort of the character of your gradient. So we started with pink, then we have this really like highlight color and then end it with blue. And so that's our gradient. With that gradient, when we go in and say, let's go to animations now, and I select here, if I go in here and say, I want to do something that is continuous, so give me a second here. That would be over here. So if I come over here and go continuous, what I can say is I want to basically take the fill color that I use and just start to offset it very slowly. And so I have a very slow speed. So all that's doing is taking the gradient that I filled it with, and it just starts to move it very slowly up. And I have a direction. It's just going up as so you see this sort of scroll through the gradient and restarts it, at the end. So that's how things like continuous work. You can do it for other things. You could have something doing a continuous rotation, so you can do blinking, other stuff. So there's other things that can be continuous. It needs to be done with discretion, I guess is a good way to put it. Otherwise, it can become quite garish. I mean, you don't want flashing lights or spinning objects all over the place. That typically is not, visually appealing, but doing something which can be subtle. So for instance, if I just had this where it was one color and I just have a very small highlight color and I just sort of move that from top to bottom, sort of at a diagonal, that could give you almost like a sheen look, like there's a light sheen going across text as it comes on and off. And then you just stop it after a certain point. So you have different ways to do that. That can look very, very appealing. But again, discretion is the word of the day when it comes to something using continuous in it. So that's how we set that up. We talked a bit about pages already. So the way we did all of the key feature points here, where these would come in. So let me sort of jump through here. These were all set up as pages in here. And so if you look at each one of these pages, you can see that on page 1, I do a zoom in to sort of show the feature. But if I look at the settings for feature 2, feature 3, and feature 4, you can see they're all set as hidden. But if I come back now and say I want to go to page 2, you'll see that I leave feature point 1 alone. I don't do anything with it. I now do the zoom in on feature 2, and feature 3 and feature 4 are both hidden. So you can see how that sort of works as I move through the pages. It's taking each thing, transitioning it on screen through some animation. This is sort of a zoom in, which just displays, and then we go to another page, and that sort of keeps everything that's on the screen static, and it just animates the new element that we're showing now on that page. You can do multiple shows on a page. So you can, like when we start this page up, we show features and feature point 1 at the same time. So we sort of unhide and do an animate on for both of those together, and then one feature at a time. Very, very flexible this way. So definitely something that you can work with. One of the things, though, that I have to say it does not do is you can't tell it, leave this element in whatever state it's in and just do something to this other element. It is a snapshot. It isn't a delta. So one of the things that I wished I had the ability to do would be to say, I can show something on or off in isolation, but everything else, however, whatever state I had it set in from the last setting, the last page setting I had, I don't want to change it. If it's hidden, keep it hidden. If it's showing, I keep it showing. But you can't do that. It basically says, you have to define the state of everything I want, and when I switch to that page, it just changes all of them. There is no leave it alone state. So that would be just one thing to point out if you're thinking of what you could do with this. But so that's really the key elements we use. As I mentioned, for data change, if you wanted to do something with data change, it will just work on when you have a new row of data or a new element in a row of data is updated. It'll basically trigger whatever animation you have set for that. And remember, it's sort of a little reverse. The data change out is saying, what do I want to do with the new element that I'm putting in? How do I want to push that out on screen? Data change in is saying, when this new element comes in, what do I want to do with the element I already have? There's a new element. How do I want to get rid of this? Show this off the screen somehow. So that's just a point we made earlier, but I want to reiterate that. So I think that really covers everything that we wanted to cover on today's show. Before we sort of wrap this up, I just want to see if we have any more comments here. So we have Michael Quist. Michael, hello back from New Jersey to Copenhagen. Glad you were able to make it. This is, it's always good to see you here. So, okay. So if you have any questions on this, what I'd like to do is we'll wrap up the main show here now, and then we'll jump into our post show, and I can cover anything you want to talk about there, about animation or anything else. It's the post show. We'll go wild. So, okay, if you can hang around, I'll see you in a couple of seconds. Otherwise, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Well, welcome back, everybody. So thank you for hanging out for the post show here. So this show was actually, for most of the shows, I usually start out with a visual idea, and then I move into what could I demo with that. This show started out the other way. I really said I wanted to cover something which went through the details of how you work with animation inside of GT Title. And then as I sort of put that together, I was like, well, how do I demonstrate this? So it was a little bit backwards, and it was actually good because I knew technically what I wanted to incorporate. And then I really just built a preset in vMix around that, with just a set of elements that hopefully highlighted everything for you guys that, would be important here. And I think, one of the cool things about GT Title Designer is that it is really flexible, but it is also, it's very flexible within the different set of tools that it provides. So this is why on a previous show, I think may have been, and later in last season 3 here, we may have had something where we showed how to integrate like moving graphics with GT titles to create more dynamic animations with active visuals. This is much more around data animation. How do I take elements that are data elements in the asset and animate how they appear and disappear under different triggers on screen? So the two of them are really complementary. One of them gives the overall visual for what is it that I want to have sort of from the branding visual attraction. The other is much more around how do I take and highlight different elements as they change on screen. So definitely things where like you could have a scoreboard come out which had different, sport-based elements that may be going throughout the display of that graphic, but you could have different elements on the scoreboard, use GT Title to do these types of animations based on changes or other aspects that you wanted, ads that you want to put on, anything like that. So definitely things that you can do with this. So let's see. So we have Deadline AV. So Martin Mahoney Music, bed sounds good. Yeah, shameless plug. Martin does film composing and has several films to his credit, and definitely we're close. He's Joe's brother, so Joe is one of the team at NeuralNet, and he is our primary technical director for this show. So it's a very talented family I get to deal with there. So they're both my nephews, and I'm exceptionally proud of them. So that was shameless personal plug there. But yes, it's thank you for noticing. So Michael is saying your experience using GT, but for a startup, how long would you guess is needed to get to that level? I think with everything in sort of GT Title Designer, you can start out using the core basic elements in it. And for me, those are all the asset layout. So actually, let me switch over to GT Title because I'll sort of give you how I would approach it as uh, the GT Title over here has basically, I can't get it switched, but it basically has a set of elements where you can embed a picture, you can embed shapes, triangles, squares, circles, and it gives you and different text elements. So those are the sort of key starting points. Building titles using those, shapes and text and images that you can bring in. All of those are, when you build the GT title, static. So, oh, I'm told we have a caller, so I will come back and sort of jump into the rest of this, Michael. But just give me a moment. We'll take on our caller here. So, hello, how are you?
I'm just great, John. It's Whit Profit talking, but my screen name is Hugh the Man, so you may have seen
Yep.
my comments and all of my queries that I've made to you in the past. So I'm jumping in here on a false pretense because I really just want to thank you for this series of shows and all that you're doing and all that you continue to do. Um, I followed your scripting to the nth degree. I like your style. Brings back memories for me because I'm an old guy and it's been a long time since I've actually done any coding. Uh,
So,
with regards to today's show, I find every time I go to GT Title Designer, it's like starting over. I don't use it enough. And I like all of the ideas, and you're planting a seed and making old guys like me work and come through with good stuff. Thanks very much.
well, from one old guy to another, I actually thank you for taking the time to watch. And I love the name You the Man. Now I know exactly how to say it correctly. So
Yes.
that makes it even better. So, but I think GT Town. This sort of touches on what Michael Chris was asking about. The way to think about it is you start out by building static elements. So text, shapes, and graphics, and you lay them out on a screen in GT Title. The first thing that you can really say is, the next level is you bind some of those elements to things in Data Source Manager. So those two work hand in glove. You have Data Source Manager, which lets you read a file full of data sets, and then you can assign things in your GT title with GT Title Editor when you're in there to say, I want to bind this piece of data to that element in GT title. So there's multiple moving parts here. There's Data Source Manager, GT title, and then the editor inside of vMix, which lets you mix those two. And so it gives you sort of three elements. But I think starting from the premise that I build a static layout and then do things outside of that to animate different pieces of that static layout is probably the best approach to take to sort of getting started. And you can just add more and more to it as you go on. So the way we did everything in here was through an XML file. So we bound that. And, after we're finished talking, I sort of jump back to Michael's question more specifically. This is something I'll show. I'll sort of jump into how we set up the XML and put that together. But that will give you a sense of that next step. But I think keeping in mind that GT title is initially just a static place to lay out elements, and then you animate them externally will help in how you approach it and what you do with it.
Okay. Thanks very much for having me on, John. Let's get back to Michael's question.
You're the man. Thank you. All right. So thank you. I appreciate you calling. Okay. So probably Michael to sort of jump back in. He's okay. This is sort of again. How much do you typically reuse or create from scratch for a given show? So because of the nature of the show, I don't get to keep a lot. I definitely have, when I do scripting, I have templates that I use for all that, and I sort of pull them in and adjust them from there. The presets themselves are typically from scratch. I may have some common elements that I use, but I think from an organizational point of view, uh, probably the best way to handle this would line up with what I said about the the static elements. If you were going to do things and you want to have something that is sort of a basic brand, you may have certain colors, certain fonts that you use all the time. And so having consistency there would be a reuse element. Uh, the other thing is, if you're going to use consistent graphics, I'd keep them all in one place. So even if you're not using pre-canned layouts all the time, you can actually use have a pool of elements that you can just bring into GT Title Designer. From there, though, it really is going to be production by production. And you may find that yourself. For a lot of these things, everybody that you'll be working with will have their own color set, own look and feel, different sorts of branding elements that they want to see, and you have to work around that. But in terms of the presets, every one of these is pretty much from scratch. So that's just the nature of what we do here. But if you're doing events or sort of hybrid events, virtual events, those types of things where you have consistent layouts, that's something that you can reuse a lot of things in. And that's, to a certain extent, that's where layers are your friend. So for instance, say you had a multi-box where you wanted to have, like, I want 3 guests and a sort of a host in the corner. And I want to set that up so that I can do this for, and I have a whole bunch of these, a 3-box, a 2-box, a guest and a host, those types of things. What you can do is you can do all of those layouts, and you do them as sort of a set of layers. And then in the back of those layers, you can actually just replace the graphic. So you could have essentially a set of inputs, which are my visual assets, my underlying visual assets, and those will then get populated throughout all of my stacked layers that I have for a show. So that can make the reuse aspect much easier, where now you're saying all of the structural things, all of the animations, all of the shortcuts, all of those things can all be reused. And all I'm doing is I have a set of inputs with key graphical elements that I just go and replace show for show with something that's specific for a client. And that can make things much, much simpler for you in terms of reusability, especially around automation, because automation can kill you if you have to redo that all the time. And if you're doing this type of work for as a career, to make a living, that time is just it becomes too expensive in the prep time to basically maximize your return as a business. So that would definitely be the approach I take. Hopefully that helps. I just throwing it out sort of as a big picture, but hopefully that makes sense. All right. So yeah, the other thing is I just wanted to mention, because I said I was going to show it. Let me jump over and see if I can just show the GT title, because this is the other piece to reuse that becomes really valuable. Everything that we did for the award show was all just set up through an XML file. And so, we have what are all the products, then we have each individual product set up, and we have all the elements that we would display on screen about those products. So these are definitely things that you can use, again, to get a lot of reuse, where if you set up something with XML for different graphical elements, different signature elements, these are things now that you could just change XML and it could reskin the entire look of a production for you. So again, other types of things to think about as you do this, where these now can become basically templates for clients. So you can go and say, all I'm going to do is load in client A's XML template, which has all of these different things described, terms, colors, other stuff. pull that all out and use that, and use titles a lot more as sort of background graphical elements to basically become the foundation for layouts. Then you can just change them by changing a single XML file. So another way to think of it, but that's all we did. We did this for data, but there's a lot more here that you can do when you start to think about it. You can use these things for colors, for imagery, as well as just picking up different elements that you'd want in general to add textual elements and website addresses, all those other things. So definitely something to consider. All right. So let's see. So let's go back. We said, so we have Guy Abdon. He's from Haiti. Guy, great to have you here. I'm in North Carolina. Good job, sir. Well, hopefully, I know that in Europe and in the US, we're both struggling with the heat. So hopefully you are doing well in North Carolina, because I know it's been a blistering week for a lot of people, especially in the South, moving up now toward the east and north. So hopefully all is well with you, sir. Thank you for joining us. So Michael's saying super great advice. Thank you for these. This is exactly what we want to cover on the show. Is hopefully things that get you thinking of different ways to work with your own production. So appreciate that, Michael. Thank you. So Marco is. I'm glad you found these tips useful, Marco. Thank you. This is a lot of fun, sort of brainstorming on some of these things with all of you. So I'm glad you're here as part of the discussion. All right. So I think we're probably, if there aren't any other questions, we're probably at the point where I think it may be worth giving this a wrap for the week. I want to let everybody know there were a lot of great suggestions thrown out for different show topics. I am not ignoring that. We're trying to think through different ways to do all of these things as actual, usable shows that we can put together. One of the interesting things is we started to look at PowerPoint. You realize two things. It's got an incredible power, but it's locked it away, and it's incredibly difficult to manipulate externally. So we're looking at different things that we can do with PowerPoint, because that was one of the things that was brought up as a topic. We also know about replay is something else we're looking at, and looking at things like central control and companion for automation. So all of those things have been, taken to heart. So I just wanted to let you know we're definitely focusing on, how to integrate those into shows here. So Obsessive Audio, I agree with you, Obsessive. GT Title can do some amazing things. I think it really is understanding where it's strong, understanding where it's not, and then using other elements like masking and videos with layers to do other more interesting things that you may want to do that GT Title can't do directly. So, there's lots of different things. The gradient offsets, but I think it's really part of the whole. When you think of what you can do with vMix and combining that with GT Title, that's where it all starts to shine. So I'm glad you found this a helpful show, and I appreciate that. Then we have, I think, Udaman just popped in and said that the shows are a wealth of usable knowledge, and I really appreciate that, because there's a lot of people, as I mentioned, that work to get these out each week. So that it's good that it's useful to people out here. So thank you. All right. So, it took me a while, but I found function equals title begin animation. Yeah. So there's all of these things are, the shortcuts are all there. And when you combine that shortcuts with scripting, a lot of possibilities. That was really why I threw in the scripting loop, just to sort of show you can use these things inside of scripting. So you can animate things with scripts and combine that. Regarding replay, this is Michael is saying it. Regarding replay, I can't get into my fingers how to only show one of the cameras. It always goes A, then B, then live. No, I think I don't use it a lot. So I mean, this would be totally honest, but I have looked at it before, and I think there's sort of a zen to it. Like once you understand how it's designed to work, then it can work a lot more smoothly. And I'm also going to look at the animation around it because why do anything manually that you can just do through animation? That's sort of our motto here at Streaming Alchemy. So let's see. Yeah, so we have Vlad. Hi, Vlad. Great to have you join us here again. I know it is extremely late there, so he just wants to have dynamic shortcuts that depend on the color category. Is there a way to do that in scripting? Like if I press a button to show the orange category. So let's see. Probably the easiest way to do that, I mean, just sort of based on if we put it in the context of something with GT title, you can use that to switch pages, and you could show different things on different pages. Anything that you would want to do, you also can do different sort of stacked layers of titles. And I think that's something that when people think of titles, they tend to think of titles as overlays. So I take the title and I put it on an overlay. Titles can go on layers too. So okay. So the other thing, because just I know in vMix, the other thing is there are color groups. I have to look. This isn't something that I've looked at before. If there's a way to change to color groups, so I'm sorry if I was misunderstanding this, but I just had Joe in my ear saying I may have been getting this wrong. So shortcuts that depend on the color category. So yeah, as far as I know, there is no immediate way to do this, but there may be a way in scripting. So I don't want to give you a sort of a definitive answer here, but let me look that up because there may be a way to see which category is selected in the vMix XML, and from there to do something specific based on that. So I will take a look. Actually, that could be another very interesting show. So let me see what I can find for you, Vlad. Sorry, I didn't understand it right in the beginning, but definitely take a look on that. So another idea for a show is a deep dive into vMix Social Manager as you use it in the show. Yeah, so a lot of cool things you can do with vMix Social Manager. So yes, it's something in a series of shows that we did with people basically doing remote voting. This was something we did in Node.js, actually. So it was like a 3-show sequence. I think we did it last season. We were actually using vMix Social and GT Title Designer to do things based on social media posts in scripting, because you could sort of access the post through scripting, through an input in GT Title Designer that you had set up in GT Title Designer. So yes, definitely some real cool stuff you can do with that as well. So okay, so what Vlad is asking for is if he presses a button to show the red category, buttons 1 to 9 will change to be inputs in the red category. So let me look at this because I got to see what you can do. But I believe there are ways to change pages on your Stream Deck through scripting. So I had this. There's a few things I'm not sure. I'd have to look in more detail on. But that means that what you could do is if I can figure out a way to know when you change the color category, then it would be possible, I believe, to use that to trigger a change in presets on a Stream Deck, which could give you something very close to what you're looking for here. So if not, though, there are other ways to do this. There's activators in vMix that you can then tie to a state that you can use scripting for. So there's probably some way to get through almost everything. The only piece of this I'm not sure about is how much control you have over changes to the categories. And I have to see, if the category tabs are accessible through any type of XML interface. So let's see. So yeah, Michael's talking about the last vMix company monthly show where they did the AI gesture. Yeah, that was definitely a something pretty cool. So I think we got a lot of cool stuff with AI that's coming in. I know for a lot of people there's a certain trepidation, but I think as you look at what AI is going to allow us to do from our creative side, uh, it's pretty exciting. Like, Michael was pointing, I was asking, like, as a one man show, how do you do certain things? So I think AI is ideal for this. It sort of extends your reach, especially when you are a small shop and you're doing things with limited resources, sometimes not even for money, not even commercially, where you're sitting there saying, I'm doing this for a school or for a ministry or some other nonprofit where this is really something I'm doing as a donation. Then having that ability to amplify what you can do is really significant. And that's why I love automation, and I think AI is just sort of the next step for a lot of what we do in automation. So thanks for pointing that out, Michael. That was definitely worthwhile. So, okay then. So I think we're going to call it a wrap. We've just crossed the hour mark, and I think that's, I've probably prattled on enough about random topics, but I'm glad that everybody, hung around to share this post show with me. So I definitely appreciate that. So until next week, everyone, be safe, be well, keep cool, and I'll see you next Friday. Take care.